Hi, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. It's nice to see you again. And it is also nice to meet you, some of the audience, for the first time here at J-Carl's Visual Arts program. And thank you, J-Carl and Naomi, for hosting this event. I would like to introduce the Artworks program first, and then the exhibition. I would like to talk about the exhibition a little bit, and then give the microphone to Naomi to start the conversation between artists. Artwork is a program that falls under the category of conventionally called the Artist Professional Development Program. But I have to say that our Artworks program covers a little bit more than that. Artworks covers the conventional professional artist development program covers the usual stuff like portfolio presentation, budget, tax preparation, and understanding marketing, and so on. But our Artworks program covers, in addition to that, we cover the questions like what is an artist, what to do as an artist, and then what to expect to become an artist or to be an artist. So that is a little bit more important than just promoting your art. So Artworks is kind of on the verge, transgressing the categories conventionally given between, educational program and artist professional development program and artist residence program, So it's there. So that's the program, and then the program culminates into two exhibitions. First one is currently on view at J-Carl. It shows 8 artists, and then the second one will come up subsequently, a group show of two-person exhibitions starting October. This particular exhibition, the group show of 8 artists, was organized not in the convention, not in the curatorial project in conventional sense. In the conventional sense, curator has a thesis or a theme, and the curator looks for artworks that supports that his or her curator's thesis or the thematic statement. But this particular show didn't go that path. Rather than I approached it like a phenomenologically, just looking at the art that is given to me, and then trying to figure out what would be the network, what would be the relationship between artworks and then among artists. So that was more interesting because it is kind of a discovery, or it requires a discovery, or it leads to a discovery. So that was the interesting point, and then I choose that path instead of stating my curatorial thesis. That is not so interesting, my brain is small, so whatever I say, that will be already known thing, and people do not have to look at again what is already known. And then, the difference between my curatorial method and the conventional one is that, the latter, the conventional curatorial method or strategy, asserts the gallery space as a contested space, which is somewhat true, but mostly untrue, because I've never seen artists in a group show who think they are competing with one another. They do not compete with one another. They rather support one another. That's what I witnessed. So saying the gallery space or looking at gallery or seeing the gallery space as a contested space is a little bit problematic because artists don't do that. Now the other way around, okay, so artists want to show their work in a gallery space, prestigious gallery space, rather than living room or anywhere. That might be true because gallery space is set or built to show artwork, so it focuses on artwork directly rather than other things. So it's attractive, of course. So therefore, it's a contested space, contested by artists. But then, that also is a problematic because not really many artists want to do that. They want to, number one, support one another, and number two, you can show art anywhere and anytime. It doesn't have to be a prestigious gallery space. Artists are looking for showing their work at a prestigious gallery space because it comes with the money at the end of the day. So basically, it's not the gallery space itself. It is more like the material resources that comes with the gallery. If you show your work at on the street, yes, it comes with the money too because people buy that. But then, a gallery space is more official and the more safer and the more bigger money. So that's why they are looking for the gallery space, not just for the space. That's my understanding, And then we should not confuse, between, what the gallery is and what the gallery does to the artist. Perhaps, back in the 19th century, salon galleries in Paris might have been the space of contest, because they had to pay. Artists had to pay, and then artists sells the work in the gallery, and then they get all or most of it. So then maybe a space of contest, but then that kind of gamble is not often. It's those gamblers are very small in number, and they do not make up most of the world we are living in. So I do not think that's the right way of seeing the gallery space. And then I emphasize that because how you define the gallery space defines the art, and that defines the artist. So it's a very crucial matter here. So I would rather step back and then looking at again and how to conceive the gallery space, how to conceive, representing art. Because we have to go back to today's situation that somehow, the past logic of gallery space as a contested space has failed when we look at today's conditions or today's situations like Black Lives Matter or other things. The racial inequality entrenched our society, and then there's a reason and cause for that, or more like a reason for that. And then the reason being perhaps might be the curatorial practice from beginning on, because that controls the artist or artwork. Although artist controls the curator at the end too. So there is a reciprocal relationship. So I propose here with this show, think about gallery space as a utopia, a no place, where we all support one another and then create a community of interconnectedness, create a relationship, being in network and then helping each other. I ask, isn't that the true meaning of a gallery, where you invite your guest and then express your appreciation of your of their support of you making art, and then enjoy the work, and then appreciate the artwork, and then artists appreciate them appreciating their work, you know. So that's my small contribution to the exhibition. And then with that, I'd like invite your guest, and I'd like to hand over my seat to Naomi, who will moderate the talk between you this evening. And your talk will more like prove how you support one another, and how you are all as an equal partner of a network transcending the past, perhaps colonial relationship of the master and slave, or of winner or loser. We have to think about or get rid of that kind of a worldview and then a way of thinking, I think. I hope our work and exhibitions help the foundations, government agencies, and then other commercial entities, big blue chip galleries, make the right choice, rather than increasing or deepening the stratification between haves and have-nots. They should make right choice in the current critical watershed moment of the COVID-19 pandemic and Black Lives Matter. Thank you. Naomi, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, thanks, Heng-Gil, just for your leadership in the artworks program and the insights into this exhibition that you just shared, and as well as exhibitions in general. Just really timely remarks. So thank you. So hey, everyone watching. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Naomi Kuo, and I am the Visual Arts Program Associate at JCal. And I'll be facilitating tonight's talk by briefly introducing each artist, and then helping to read out questions from the YouTube chat box. So feel free to leave questions there at any time during the talk. So as far as structure, each artist will speak for about 5 minutes and then answer a few questions for about 5 minutes as well. And then we'll have time all together at the end for questions that are directed to any of the artists, as well as Heng-Gil. So the artists participating in tonight's talk are Megan Roper, Monnero Guervil, Angela Miskis, Dario Mohr, Nancy Paredes, and Marie Saint-Cyr. So that's all of us here, and we'll all be back. All right, so first up is Megan Roper. And I've got a bio for her here. Megan Roper is a Queens-based textile artist who works with found fabrics. She's originally from Colorado and received her bachelor's in studio art and advertising at the University of Colorado. She came to New York with Teach for America and then received her master's in teaching from Relay Graduate School of Education. She's exhibited in several Queens-based galleries and also owns her own upcycled jewelry business. So Megan, take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Naomi. First, I just want to say thank you to Naomi for organizing this program, and thank you, Heng-Gil. I've learned a lot this year from you, and just shout out to all the other artists in this program. It's been great getting to know you guys, and I have learned a lot from you. Okay, I got my timer started. I just wanted we can start with this. This is the piece that I have in the show. So Ben, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So I have really always been into sewing. My grandma taught me how to sew when I was really young, and that has been, for me, the medium that I've just continually go back to. I just feel very confident and comfortable making things and sewing things with fabrics. Another thing that my family would do a lot was we'd always go to thrift stores growing up, just to look around and look for things. And I just was always fascinated by the things that you would find secondhand, especially in the fabrics and the clothes. To me, textiles are just very intimate. If you think about maybe it's like sheets or a dress and just the life that they've lived and the way that they kind of got there has always been something that I've thought about. In my work, I try to explore connections between people, and I use found fabrics and textiles to do that. This piece that we're looking at was made with a dress and some like a tie and the inside pieces of that. You can go to the next slide. I was trying to explore different textiles and how they kind of come together, what it could be like if you use transparent textiles or different stretches and different material types and how they would look. I don't usually plan like a structure for them. I would kind of try to channel some sort of like feeling that is kind of like fleeting, and I want to pick things or fabrics that to me make that impression, and I'll kind of combine them together, cut them up, start sewing and stretching and kind of see how they go. You can go to the next slide. In these pieces, again, I wanted to kind of play with the transparent fabrics and see how they would look. I wanted to maybe install them in different locations. And yeah, just these were all kind of like beginning experiments into this work. You can go to the next slide. This piece was one of the larger ones that I've attempted to do. I wanted to give myself a challenge of how big could this be? And in this piece, I was pretty excited about how the ripples of the fabric and how they kind of came together in certain areas. You can go to the next slide. So one of the things I learned in this program that Heng-Gil was talking about is the amount of time that artists should be working in the studio and working in their practice. So once, you kind of had that revelation, I started like tracking my hours and how much I was working, and I realized that I needed a different space. So it was my goal this year to get a studio space. So I made that happen, and then once I got into my studio space, I was able to kind of play around with things a little bit more, and that's when I had an idea to try to make pieces and get them stretched into the natural way that they were kind of moving towards, instead of having them in the regular pre-made stretcher bars. So that's where I've kind of started to do some of these pieces with a jigsaw. I've cut out the frame. You can go to the next slide. Again, here's more of the pieces with the like the natural kind of shapes that I've made for stretching them. These pieces also, I put stuffing into the base, so they're kind of more 3D and sculpture-like. You can go to the next slide. In this piece, I was trying to experiment with multiples and how they would look together, and if I could do more, and if I could expand them. You can go ahead to the next slide. Yes, so here's the piece I have in the show right now. I'm pretty excited about this one. I like the different patterns and colors that are coming together. And I think I'm almost running out of time, so you can go to the next slide. This is another project that I'm doing. I had an idea about like textile graffiti, almost, of tracking where people have been and the coincidences of, being in the same seat as someone else, and how like the weird way that those things can come together. So I've started doing these beadings on random places. So I'm excited about this project. This is something I'm working on. And the last slide, I think, is next. Yeah, so right now, after the pandemic started, I found that beading is very relaxing for me, and also continuing with the transparent fabric. So this is kind of the area that I'm in right now of exploring this. So thank you. That is just over 5 minutes.
All right, so we'll move into a little bit of Q&A. I'm noting a lot of love on the YouTube comments.
Great, thanks.
Organic
got some friends to come in.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you everyone for engaging there. So I'll give a little short moment for anyone who wants to ask a question immediately. I have a question of my own. Well, I love the textile graffiti idea, and I think it's an interesting way to like highlight that kind of the experience that you are interested in, that like that use textile carries, but you're taking note of it where it is, like the seat of an airplane or bus or all that. In the COVID-19 times where we're all like hyper aware of how dangerous that, you know, past experience of a material or place can be, yeah, how do you think about your practice now? Like,
yeah, it's actually very interesting. I mean, I have 3 more days left before, like, I have COVID right now and have 3 more days left where I've had to be, I'm fine, we're good.
okay.
But it's like the tracing of it, like that's why I kind of thought of that name, bead tracing. Like I had to think, you know, about all these places that I had been and the people that I had talked to and been around safely, right? Even then, but I don't know, it's still even fascinating to think of just the layers of that. I don't know. I think it's an exciting thing, and every time I like see little pieces of like fabric that's exposed, I just want to like add a little something there, kind of as like a mark that you've been there, or that someone else had crossed that path. Definitely something I'm trying to keep exploring.
Great. We got a question. So from Amanda Roper, what inspires the titles of your work?
Good question. Thank you. So the titles kind of come from like a fleeting moment that I want to kind of like capture. And like I'm trying to think, for example, so the piece that I'm showing in our JCal show is called Talking About Babies at Bachelorette Parties. And it just, I don't know, I'm turning 31 in a few days, and there was a time, this was before COVID, when I was making that piece, where I felt like all my friends were getting married, all this like was happening to me, and every time I would go, and it'd be like the same kind of conversations that I was having at the same things, just in like a different place. And to me, that like realization that was just like felt overwhelming, I wanted to kind of capture that.
So you have an idea first sometimes before or while you're looking through your fabrics, perhaps.
Yeah, like I'll have an idea of like that, like encapsulated like feeling that I want to like create, and then I find the fabrics. I have like them all kind of organized in colors, and then I'll pull, and then I kind of start like cutting and sewing and stretching them. But they're all kind of like around that one like fleeting moment that I've found myself in.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more. Let's see. From Aaron Thomas. This is related. So how do you decide what kind of fabrics you choose for specific pieces? Is it intentional, pre-planned, or color specific?
That's a good question. I think that like there was another example of like the piece that was like combining your things with my things. That's what I was moving in with my partner, and I just felt like I was like overwhelmed, like a lot of stuff changing and things happening at once. And then for some reason, I was like drawn to that. That was like the checkered piece that kind of like looks like it even like kind of has that feeling of it. So I look at patterns and colors, and I try to like match those two together and figure out, you know, there might be like a balance of like these two kind of go together, but what either can offset that. Maybe it's like a velvet, or maybe I want like a beaded thing or something in there that kind of brings it together. I tend to go to a lot of floral. I mean, there's a lot of floral in there.
Fair enough. Let's see, maybe a last quick question. What do you think about the relationship of your work in the show to Georgia O'Keeffe. Is that someone you
Yeah.
think about?
Yeah, definitely. I've heard that piece, like flowers, vagina, like, you know, that's like what it kind of gets at. And I mean, I think when I was thinking about what I was trying to encompass, like it was very like female, you know, all these like female like expectations of you're about to get married, and now all we can do at the bachelorette parties is talk about when you're gonna have a baby. And there's just like this pressure of women, like this age, you know, of hey, when's the baby? Like, when are you getting married? And that whole thing. So maybe I think that is where the vaginal, I guess, flower like thing comes. But I do definitely see that connection there, and I'm, you know, definitely inspired by Georgia O'Keeffe.
But sometimes that shape is incidental. It just comes out. And
yeah,
like,
I guess like, yeah, I mean, if you're like sewing and like you make a corner and then when you like flip it and you see the other side, it does kind of like, they naturally start kind of like making those shapes. But then there's definitely the ruffles, like I go in and like make those kind of like more apparent.
Got it. All right, we'll come back to you at the very end, but thank you so much, Megan.
Yeah, thank you.
And next we have Monnero, and I have a little introduction for him. Monnero Guervil is an educator and domino enthusiast from New York City and lover of all things Caribbean culture. He uses custom domino boards to initiate interaction and conversation. All right, take it away. You gotta unmute yourself too. Yep.
Can you guys hear me now? Okay, so hello everyone. As mentioned in the introduction, I am a Caribbean enthusiast as well as domino enthusiast because I'm Caribbean myself. I'm Haitian American, and that is something that's been attached to me my whole life, basically. And as you can see, it's a domino board that's been customized with 25 of my values. So I've done this for my 25th birthday. Art has been in my life my entire life. It's something I admired growing up, but when life got in the way, I had to step back from it. But as my 25th birthday was coming up, I said, I'm gonna jump in no matter what, because I have to find a way to express myself, be more creative, but most importantly, I wanted to be unique. I admired all types of projects that I was seeing online as well as in person that focused on people. So like portrait photography, video, stories. I'm sure you guys heard of Humans of New York, that guy who takes pictures of New Yorkers and basically shares their whole story. That's just started from a conversation. Things like the Stranger Project, where this guy kind of shares people's stories via regular computer paper. They come in and they have an opportunity to share their story anonymously on paper, and it's hung up for people to see all the different strangers' stories, the Stranger Project, as well as other interviewing platforms all over the internet. So that's something I really admired. But I figured as an artist, I wanted to kind of narrow my focus, but then I realized I didn't have to if I went the multimedia route. So for my 25th birthday, I decided to incorporate my 25 values. As you can see, community is the biggest, as well as sacrifice, love, and creativity, as well as faith and service, because those are major components of my life. Community as a core value is why I'm a part of JCal. You know, it's something, I'm in the Southeast Queens area. I kind of heard of them before, but never really got a chance to interact. And I figured after reading the program information, like this would be a perfect opportunity for me to meet other artists that are kind of the same place I am or a bit of far ahead. And the opportunity to interact would just promote growth. And I've been a part of other communities my whole life that has basically promoted growth, whether it's in religious sense, academic sense, and things of that nature. So yeah, at first, this started off with friends and families, but I wanted to also incorporate that extra component that I've seen in other projects where I interviewed strangers. So I got the chance to meet mothers on Mother's Day, fathers on Father's Day, just basically using this to follow the themes of holidays in the calendar, to have people share their stories of sacrifice, love, creativity, knowledge, and things of that nature through conversations with me. And the reason I say it's multimedia, because it could either be through a photograph, through video, and I've also had some written interview pieces published in magazines online. So yeah, that's one thing. And hold on, I can't really see. So one thing I wanted to share, you could go to the next slide. There's an opportunity of so not everyone wants to share their story publicly. Some people want to remain anonymous because when you're having fun or sometimes drinking or eating, like really great stories could come out of it. And sometimes it's only for the person interacting with the interviewee could kind of hear. So in this case, I was interviewing a family member, and during this conversation, when we focused on any of the 25 topics on the board, things got really deep, conversations we never had in person. So that was kind of my unique twist on it, as far as like adding a board game that's really big in the Caribbean culture into this interviewing kind of like platform. You go ahead and go to the other photo. In this case, this is more relaxed setting, not at home indoors, but outdoors in a public park, where I got to interview a friend and basically went through many of the topics. And similar to my relative experience, I was able to hear great stories and document that. But like I mentioned before, not everyone wants to share their personal things publicly. But sometimes there's opportunities for people that want to share publicly, as demonstrated by the articles that have been published. I wasn't timing myself, but I might be past that 5-minute mark. So I'll end it there, and I'm open for questions.
Sure. So like before, if anyone wants to ask a question, drop them in the chat. But I'll ask a question first. How did you get in touch with the strangers? Like, how did you set that up?
Sometimes it's asking a friend or family, and reaching out to someone that meets a certain criteria that you're interested in exploring. So similar to the other projects I admire, they try and interact with people they don't normally interact with on the regular basis. So in my neighborhood, it's pretty Caribbean, but it's mostly Jamaican and Haitian. You hear of mainly Dominican communities being more on top of Manhattan, as well as in the Bronx. So that was an opportunity for me to like get out of my community and explore a Dominican mother on Dominican Mother's Day, which happens to be on a different day than the traditional Mother's Day that we celebrate in America. And she was able to share some of the proudest moments she's experienced as a mother, the most disappointing part of being a mother sometimes. She was able to share the lessons she learned from her mother that she transferred down to her children, the qualities her mother and she share, as well as other people in the community of great examples of what motherhood looks like or should look like, and things of that nature. So that conversation was really focused on Mother's Day for that one, but she did focus on the values of love, wisdom, and faith, which played like a major component in her life, which also came from the domino board.
Okay, so you play domino with them and you bring the board, and then you're just talking. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and document it depending on whether the interviewee wants a record of it or not.
Gotcha. Okay, we have a question. Do you consider the interviews as a part of this work or as separate pieces?
I mean, artists definitely enjoy what they do, whether it be drawing, digital art, they enjoy the process. So gathering the information for the pieces is a great part of it, and that results in the final product. So I do consider them both as pieces of the art.
Yeah. Okay, next one. Amazing. I was curious about how you view the transition from the interactive aspect to artifact in a gallery. Have you considered having your pieces in gallery space for interactive play?
That was something that was suggested to me by the JCal community, but COVID restrictions and things of that nature, that is not a reality this time around. However, in the future, definitely, because you never know, someone might have something they want to share with a complete stranger in a gallery space.
What are aspects of the interviews or like artifacts from the interviews that you think that you would be excited to have in a gallery space? Like, yeah, how does that translate for you?
Well, it would have to be like a recording, the fact that I can't really transcribe it right then and there, but being able to record it right then and there, and then maybe in the future gallery put it as like a digital multimedia project, like on a wall, that aspect would be pretty interesting, because I feel like with subtitles, and not just that, but it to assure accessibility, maybe even in different languages, because not everyone in a gallery speaks English. You know, sometimes when something is just visual, they could appreciate the art for what it is, and sometimes they might have someone there to translate for them what the art is meant to be. But if they could kind of find out what the art is about in their own language, I think they would appreciate it more.
Yeah, for sure. And for those of us who are not Caribbean or Caribbean American, can you speak a little bit about like why domino, and like what about like the culture of domino playing that like
I'm surprised
you were
something like
interested
it
in?
hasn't been recorded before, because the best conversations come out of gameplay, and specifically dominoes. Like, it's the game I've been playing my whole life, and the best conversations have happened there. So something needed to be created in the, where domino discussions were basically on the record or in some type of organized sense. And I see that someone asked, do I have a set of questions you like to ask, or do I let things flow? It could depend on the interviewee. Like in the case of the mother, the Dominican mother for Mother's Day, I had a set of questions I wanted to ask. However, the conversation sometimes had to flow. She took it somewhere we didn't expect it to go, and I'm going to respond accordingly. So it could go both ways.
Great. Where do you see the project going next, or your work in general?
Continuing to explore other boroughs, and not just people of Caribbean descent. Maybe like bringing dominoes to people that haven't played dominoes a day in their life, the opportunity to learn. So like having conversations through learning the whole process, but still focusing on those core values.
Nice. All right, we'll leave it there, and hopefully get some more questions at the end. Thank you. Okay, so next we have Angela Miskis. So Angela is an Ecuadorian American mixed media artist residing in Queens, New York. She graduated from the School of Visual Arts in 2013 with a degree in visual and critical studies, and has completed residencies in Leipzig International Art Program in Germany and at Chashima. And with that, I'll give the floor over to Angela. And is it a matter of muting and unmuting, perhaps? There we go.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. And thanks so much to JCal for providing this opportunity for us to share the work. Please go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so a little bit about myself. I was born in Ecuador and grew up in my grandparents' house as part of an extensive family. As an adult, I realized how much of my art practice is influenced by my upbringing. Every time I go back, I'm pleasantly reminded of their creativity and ingenuity every time I visit my grandparents and go back to my childhood home. Their home is full of examples of repurposing objects to serve many uses, and they really train my eye to see possibilities instead of limitations. Next slide, please. So this way of thinking is how I create and approach the world. It is interesting to apply the same consideration I learned out of necessity and practice it to create art. I am very in tune with the objects I encounter during my daily life, and I consider the materials, the shapes, and the colors. And it's really exciting to me to think of the possibilities of transforming something into something that is unexpected, that goes beyond the intended use. Next slide. So my most recent example of applying this way of thinking is my new painting series called Systems and Shapes that I started back in 2017. And what I did is that I started using my collection of cardboard forms that I have been saving from various packaging material. I initially started by directly tracing the cardboard form on the canvas and freestyling compositions as I developed the image. The painting in the show titled Heavy is the Way Ups and Down is actually an important piece in the series development. Next slide, please. And Ben, if you can play the video. Okay, so this video is a time lapse of the development of the painting. I initially set up the canvas and started by accumulating leftover paint I mixed for other work that I didn't really want to waste. And I also tried out a few other compositions before settling on using this big surface and this big canvas as part of the Systems and Shapes series. We can finish the video, but we can also move to the next slide and we'll be able to see the still images of the video. And then, so one thing I realized by going back to find the images of the progress for this painting is it's a really good example of risk-taking and not being afraid of starting over for a chance of maybe achieving something greater. This risk-taking is what makes creating art exciting to me. To work within my limitations and decisions and to learn from the solution of solving a problem that I created myself. Second, it was foreshadowing my use of the human form and more personal narrative, although I wasn't really ready to get into that back in 2018. And third, this painting gave me the idea of digitizing the cardboard shapes to have more flexibility in creating compositions. Next slide, please. Sorry. Okay. So what I did is I digitized the shapes of these forms that I was using, and this was really a game changer. I was not only limited to the actual size, I was no longer limited to the actual size of the physical cardboard form, but instead I was able to multiply them and scale them to my liking. Next slide. And in early 2019, I created about 5 digital compositions using this approach. Next slide, please. And then I spent all of 2019 pretty much relearning my way of working. I kept asking myself, how do I take a risk when I already know the image's final look? I answered this question by connecting more deeply with the image and what it is trying to say about my memories and life experiences. I also reminded myself it is okay to let go of an idea and divert from the original compositions. And finally, I learned to be more precise with my decision-making to be able to maintain parts of the composition that I liked. Next slide. And fast forward to 2020. Again, we can all agree that it has been a very difficult year. But I have seen so many examples of people sharing their stories, their struggles and pains. I feel really empowered by the courage to be open and realize the importance of connecting with people, by sharing our life experiences. I feel ready now to start integrating images that have an emotional significance to me, and I want to expand how I honor my upbringing beyond my art processes. I am ready to create narratives representing the key people and events in my life, while also figure out new ways of staying true to my love of abstraction, mixed media, and experimentation. Next slide, please. And lastly, please stay in touch and follow this series development by subscribing to my newsletter. And thanks again for tuning in. And I'm happy to answer any questions either now or during the Q&A at the end. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Angela. Wow, there's so many different questions I could ask you. I mean, this might just be more of a personal question, but I'm curious with your main practice being abstraction, or at least it started there. Was that like a conscious effort to not directly paint about things in your life? Like you're saying now it's pivoted to and you're ready to bring in more representation. So.
Yeah, I think something that I realized by working on this latest series is how abstraction was a way of almost distancing myself from a lot of the feelings and emotions that I maybe haven't had the courage to process or to really speak about. I think to be able to speak about your own experiences, first of all, you have to be ready yourself and you have to be ready to share that. And I have done representational work, but in a drawing format. And I used to draw other people, but never really my own experience. And I think I just needed a little extra push to be able to do that, and to also to be able to be in a more steady mindset to be able to handle some of the things that I want to share in the future. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just the moment feels right now.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Interesting that you find the strength to do that in a very chaotic time. Now's the right time. Yeah. So a question from Alyssa. Mm-hmm. Fantastic work and process. I'm so curious about the original cardboard shapes. Did you hold on to them or perhaps discard them, and why?
Yeah, I still have a few of them in my studio. I kept my favorite ones because I couldn't part with them. And then but the majority of them I photographed and digitized by outlining the form. And the different shapes that just came through me through many years, through different maybe electronics that I purchased or packaging. And it's just something that I do before I throw anything away. I just like really look at it and sort of like, oh, this is really exciting. I wonder what it's going to turn into if I draw it, if I repeat it. Or sometimes it's just intriguing, even though I don't really know what it's going to be in the future, but I still keep it as part of my collection of like beautiful garbage. So
yeah, when does that ever get too much? Like as a artist who works in that way as well, it's like the burden of like everything wants to be something, and what do you let go of, or what are you drawn to more?
Yeah, I think before I started this series, I went through that process of like, okay, I need to use this or just get rid of it. And so I actually cycled through a variety of ideas until I finally got to these shapes. And these were actually the material that actually stuck to me and gave me the most amount of potential. And I was really able to explore. But I think you just have to like sit down and it's like, okay, what can I do with this? Maybe give yourself like a month to go like through cycle through a few ideas, prototyping, thinking fast through what you're trying to use. And if you're not engaged to it, then I think you can safely just, put it aside and move to the next thing.
Got it. Yeah. And lastly, I noticed the work in the show, there's so many layers underneath the one that we see. Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that, or where there's some layers that are just like covered completely or something, or?
So for that painting and in general in my art practice, I do like leaving traces of all the different layers. It might be like a little tiny speck in a corner, but I do try a conscious effort to show everything that has happened. I think the title "Heavy is the Way Ups and Downs" is very much how I felt throughout all of 2018. I think that was a really big year of transformation for me. And as I was getting towards the end of the painting, I just realized how many of those sittings and decisions that I took out and apply again was a representation of just how I was feeling I was changing at that moment. And I think the reason why, it changed so drastically is because there were so many false moments of like, oh, I'm done. And then I will go back to the painting and just realize, no, I can push it farther. And so sometimes the better way to start is just by completely erasing and starting over. And I think that is something that is really present on that painting. And it's something that I actually like to do because I feel it's important to be able to let go and then don't be afraid of hopefully going back to the same place where you started, or just hopefully getting to somewhere better.
Yeah. So many metaphors for life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Next, we have Dario Mohr. And Dario is a painter, assemblage, and installation artist based in Brooklyn, New York. Dario received a BFA from Buffalo State College and an MFA from the City College of New York. And he is also founder and director of a nonprofit organization called Enclave Arts Alliance, Inc. So Dario, hello. Hi. You'll have to unmute so we can hear you. Yeah.
My mistake. Thank you so much for the
No
introduction, Naomi.
Yeah, take it away.
I also want to say thank you once again to Naomi and also to Heng for providing this opportunity for us. In a lot of ways, you've inspired me. Heng, you inspired me specifically for my art practice to create an LLC for it. And also, both of you have inspired me in some ways that I am reframing and rethinking the nonprofit Enclave Arts Alliance, which I'm the founder and executive director of. So just in a lot of senses, I really appreciate your feedback to me throughout this fellowship. And I am excited to potentially continue working with you both down the road. But for now, I will speak a little bit about my artwork. This is the beginning of a series called the Cookout. The Cookout was inspired by, it was just my thinking about Black spaces, and just like during quarantine and COVID, everything that's been happening politically and socially with the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests, I've been thinking about just in what ways can I use assemblage and objects and, sort of interpret them in different ways symbolically and juxtapose them together to form like a larger impression or interpretation of the times that are happening that we're facing right now. So this was one of the pieces. This is called the grill. This was made up of a wheel that's just been sitting down the block from me. There's just this giant wheel just there. And also just, I think I found that the bumper about 2 blocks away as well. So I found the bumper, I dragged it over to the wheel, and I also had these bike tires that I had assembled for a previous piece. And when I put it all together, I felt like it just really brought home what I wanted to create with this particular piece. I've been staring at that wheel for about a year, and I was trying to figure out some way to be able to create something from it. So I was glad that during this this quarantine time, I managed to kind of pull it together. So that is one piece that is a part of the series titled The Cookout. You can go to the next slide. This is another piece that's a part of that series. This was actually created in my backyard. I used my grill and also some other assemblaged pieces. These are actually a couple fabric sculptures that I created out of some clothing. One of them is a denim jacket. Another one's a pleather jacket that I had painted and used for a different painting, a different series, and then I repurposed for this particular piece. In a lot of ways, this work represents my process in general. I like to create artwork, and then after I take it apart, I'll put it away in my shed, and then maybe months, years later, I'll find another purpose for it. I'll take that work and I'll recycle it or reuse it for a new piece of work. So that's what happened with this piece. This piece is called The Barbecue. And in a lot of ways, once again, I was drawing from the racial tensions of today and my perspective on it. And I also was influenced by just the environment, being forced to use my backyard as my studio. I was very influenced by the foliage and other things around. So that also played a part in the aesthetics of the piece. You can go on to the next slide. So similar to the last piece that you just saw, this is actually an entirely different series called Bloodline. But this was, I think, a continuation in the sense that I was inspired by the outdoors. I think being trapped inside for the first like 4 or 5 months of quarantine and really not leaving my house at all, I was really inspired when I got the chance to have a space again. This is actually from a residency that I have on Governor's Island, where there's nobody on the entire island pretty much, so it's safe to be there. But like once I received that residency and I knew that I had a space beyond my apartment to be able to create, I really wanted to go there and just bring as much green into that white space as possible. And I actually repurposed a painting that I'd created earlier this year to use for this series titled, the series is called Bloodline. This piece is called Genesis. And in a lot of ways, I'm drawing from my ancestry. You know, I sort of created a creation myth with this that kind of in some ways metaphorically reflects how I believe, you know, like where humanity came from. We were all, you know, obviously we all came from Africa, but also sort of a science fiction take on where humanity is going. So this is the first piece of that series, and it's a 6-piece series, and it just progresses through the history of what happens in this myth that I created through visual art. You can go on to the next piece. This is another piece in that series. This is actually about 3 pieces in, actually 4 pieces in. And as you can see at this point, there isn't any painted, there is a painted aspect to it, but it's inside the fireplace. And you have to really stick your head in to see it. But for the most part, like it's bare bones. I wanted to really push myself to use different materials and to, you know, and use some materials that I'm familiar with, like wood. I use wood stretcher frames that I, you know, take apart from canvases. Like, as I mentioned earlier, like I often repurpose old paintings or old pieces for new pieces. So one process that's been sort of a mainstay in my work lately has been taking old paintings and ripping them off the canvases, the stretcher frames, and then like using the stretcher frames to build things. So this is like a tall ladder. This piece is actually called Dissension. And I painted the wood, and I also dyed the wood that's on the bottom to be able to create this piece. There's a little bit of faux grass in it as well. And this is, yeah, a continuation piece of the Bloodline series. So on that note, we can move on to the next piece. So this was one of my first ventures into repurposing paintings. You can see there's a little painting inside of it. This piece is called The Catch. The reason I included this piece is because it really kind of set the tone for the trajectory of a lot of my recent work. The previous pieces that you saw were created this year, and this piece was actually created in, this was created last year. So using a lot of different materials, building an entire cage-like structure out of wooden canvas armature. And also, I used lots of natural dyes to be able to create this object that's caged and against the wall there. This piece, just in a lot of ways, for me, represents sort of the new direction of my work in a lot of ways. This kind of pioneered like a lot of new perspectives for me. On that note, you can move on to the next image. This is another piece from around that era. This is from last year. This piece is called Free Spirit. I included this image because I think it brings a different element, a different energy from some of the other pieces that I've included, and I just wanted it to add that flavor that I think some of my other work also has, and but I didn't necessarily focus on this year. So that's why I included this piece in. And this piece is actually made of stuffed socks and a bike seat and a bunch of other objects that I had lying around the house, basically. So yeah, this is actually one of my personal favorites. So I think I'm also partial to include it for that reason. We could also move on to the next piece. Oh, I guess that was all of them. All right, thank you so much.
Thanks, Dario. You're getting some positive reinforcement from the chat as well. So in your artist statement, you talk about your pieces being like altar places or places of veneration, or just like to connect to that sense of like what is beyond just the physical world, right? And in not necessarily like, you know, religious sense per se, but so would you say that these pieces are still in that vein, or
I would say some of them are.
Larger? Yeah.
I think that the sanctuary like experiences that I like to have people experience and participate in are in the newer pieces, which were the first 4 pieces that I showed. But I do think that they're more kind of verging on effigy in some ways, which is another part of my work. You know, I think sanctuaries are more kind of for honoring objects or honoring whatever it is that you revere. Sometimes, you know, with the use of objects or other things that in some way symbolically like add meaning to whatever it is, the shrine, the sanctuary space. But I think some of my feelings during COVID quarantine haven't really been as reverential as they were. So I think that in a lot of ways I was kind of veering more on effigy sculpture for those, which are usually erected and created to kind of take notice of their existence and then burn or in some way discard, degrade, and hopefully, you know, set a tone for a new path, new beginning.
Wow, yeah. Great. Let's see, we have... Okay, let me take a question from the audience first. It seems there are elements of Afrofuturism in the Bloodline series. Is that a movement that resonates with you in general for that?
Actually, so there's a book that I read called Homo Deus by Yuval Harari, and it's about like he has 2 books actually. Sapiens is about like the history of humanity up until this point, and he's a historian, so he speaks about that. But then his second book almost gets a little bit sci-fi, where he has some predictions for where humanity is going in terms of human upgrading and the class divide. And as the rich keep getting richer, they're going to start wanting to do whatever they can to live forever. So they'll keep upgrading their body and more or less turn into like human cyborgs or something along those lines. And, you know, all of the, you know, everyone below that class, you know, a lot of people of color and things, you know, that being a factor in the Bloodline series as well. I think that book influenced me to create this myth. And also, because you'll see in later pieces, some of which I'm still working on, that there are human upgraded individuals who are kind of taking the Earth Mother down from her grace. So in a lot of ways, I would say that I would say that it is sort of verging on Afrofuturism, this particular series.
Interesting. Will we be able to see the work at Governor's Island at some point, or?
It's not looking like no one is allowed in the building except for the artists in residence.
Okay.
And it seems like next year would be the actual art opening for it. But you know, we may also have to do a Zoom version of that art exhibition, depending on how things are. But you can see the progress of the work, and you can see photos of the images, photos of the work so far on my Instagram page at Dario Mohr _art, or you can find it on my website at dariomohr.com.
Got it. Yeah, I guess in this age of like virtual everything, it's like the experience is for you, but then like documentation is that much more important.
It really is.
Yeah. We've got one last quick question from Angela. How do you maintain your work? Do you worry about their longevity and preservation?
Honestly, I don't worry too much about the longevity of it because I have so much of it stuffed in my shed that I just like, I mean, it's there, so it's sort of protected, but at the same time, you know, things have happened to my work along the way, and I've got so much other work, and I've got so many new materials that I found objects and things that I can always make new pieces out of. I'm not really too attached to my work after I create them, but it's nice to have them to be able to recycle for.
Right, you mentioned that being part of your practice, right?
Exactly. It's nice to have, but you know, I'm not super attached to them, to be honest.
To break it apart, yeah.
Yeah, I'm always ready to break it apart.
Nice, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have two more artists. Next, we have Nancy Paredes. So Nancy is an artist based in Queens, and I know from conversation, also the Bronx. Hopefully that wasn't a secret. She works primarily in printmaking and photography. She received her BFA from the Cooper Union School of Art, and she had a solo exhibition at the Queens Botanical Garden in 2019 through the Queens Council on the Arts, and has also worked as a printmaking technician at Cooper Union. So Nancy, welcome to the screen.
Hi, thank you, Naomi, for introducing me.
Sure.
And hi, everyone. How are you doing? I'm really excited and nervous to do this little talk, but here we go. I'm Nancy Paredes, and I'm an artist. I work primarily in photography and printmaking. And yes, I'm originally from Queens, New York, and as of 2 months ago, I just moved to the Bronx. So I have a new community, but I'm still very much feel a part of Queens. And another part of me is that I am a first generation. My family came from Honduras, and so I'm like a first generation, second generation. And I feel like a lot of my experience has to do with this idea of duality. And for example, like my language, my culture, my perspective, and this theme of duality is something that I feel that comes a lot in my art. And I use it as like a lot of self-reflection to ask questions about myself, about my family, about the people that I know. And I think a lot in my childhood, I was always fascinated by this question that I would ask myself: how is it possible that I am from somewhere and I've never been there before? So I think my approach to art, unconsciously at the beginning, but now I'm a little bit more aware of, is exploring that idea of trying to figure out where you're from. And I think nostalgia has a lot to do with it too, because sometimes I feel like I'm trying to remember somewhere that I don't know. So here is my portion in the show at the moment. And I want to walk you through some of the images that I have here. So we can go on to the next slide. So this is one of the images that I have up. And this one is called Copan. And so the series, the work that I have up for JCal is part of the work that I had up for the Queen's Botanical Garden. And the show centered around a series of collagraphs that I made. And basically a collagraph is a print that uses whatever surface as a base. You varnish it and you put ink on it and you print it. And so this is the collagraph that I made using layerings of plastic bags. And basically, I feel like I came across these like abstracted landscapes, which I further went into thinking of them as like visual memories. And so basically I would unconsciously find myself making work of these places that I have been or actually have photographed, and was doing this without realizing it. So if we go on to the next image, these are as well collagraphs. And at first I started working with more like monochrome images, and I wanted to transition into something that was a little bit more playful, a little bit more colorful, more three-dimensional. So I ended up coming up with this. And this one is called Marbles 1, but it actually was what led me to my title of the show, which was Marbles in the Valley. And I wanted this title and this piece as well to have this experience of feeling like you're in between a landscape, in between the world, into these two worlds, and having that perspective of seeing this and having a narrative of finding along your way these like little gems, these marbles, and within this world, finding these marbles. And I also came to think of marbles being as like a symbol of perhaps like planets or solar systems, and these like miniature worlds and a microcosm of what we're living. So if we go to the next one, it's a detail as well of this marbles, and go on to the next one. And process for me is very important. I feel like for particularly in this show, my process of printing from these plastic bags and printing these abstracted landscapes is what allowed me to tell my story. And I also wanted to invite the audience to be a little bit, invite the audience to understand my process, because process for me is what allowed me to come up with this timeline, this story between parents and their children, and how these two separate, one could be from one country and one could be from another. And it's a big jump, but the process is what allowed me to connect it. So I had these up on my exhibition, and people were allowed to touch and handle the books and flip through them. So we can go on to the next one. So this one is called Daylight. And I recently was thinking about this one, and I'm starting to think that maybe as well, I kind of see this as the marbles microcosm thing again as well. And so my show had a series of collagraphs, and a part of those collagraphs, I wanted to include photographs as well. And the photographs I find are similar images to the collagraphs, only represented and manipulated in a different way. And this is an image that I had overlapped. And it's also called, the process that I used to make it is called the gum bichromate print, which is essentially like a watercolor photograph where I'm printing, I separate an image into 4 layers, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, and mix watercolor with a light sensitive solution and expose it. And I layer all these 4 colors onto each other to create a photograph. And while layering all these watercolor photographs, I also layered images within it. So we can go on to the next one. And this is called Roots and Underworld. And I feel like this is a very similar approach to my marbles pieces as well. First off, this is a photogravure, and photogravure for me is, I love this process. It's like the perfect child between printmaking and photography. And I really love how my hand is really a part of it as well. And a lot of this is like trying to beat out as many images as I can from one image, and flipping it and turning it, zooming in. And the reason I named it Roots Underworld was because as I was photographing this tree, I I think what I really wanted to do was just trying to find the hidden from it. So trying to see what different landscapes I can create from this one moment. And I found like night, and I found caves, and I found rivers and canals. And I think that a part of that also has to do with self-reflection as myself too, like trying to like see what is hidden from me and my family and people that I know, and trying to uncover the roots and the underground of it. Okay. So I'm open for questions.
All right, thank you. We do have a question from Heng-Gil. What do you think about home? To me, your work seems to explore the idea of home or longing for home. Perhaps I'm influenced by your talk. ...
I'm also trying to figure that out with my work. And no, it's definitely an intriguing idea to me, because I've always been, like I said, like my mother and we are so different from one another. Like I grew up from Queens, and now I live in the Bronx, and she grew up in Honduras in a village. So it's just like one generation gap. Like, how is it that I live such a different life from what she lived? And I'm just interested in how like that journey, and how I still feel connected to her, even though I live a completely different life from her.
So it's not that far away place is somewhere you wish you were, but like the fact that you do experience part of it.
Yeah,
here.
yeah. It has a mystery to it, because sometimes it's not like I want to go back, or go back. I never really been. But yeah, how is it that I still experience those feelings? It's kind of like a mystery for me that I'm trying to like break with the work that I'm doing.
Yeah. I was just thinking about the fact that both your photography and your printmaking is about like creating these vast landscapes out of things that are actually quite small.
Yeah.
Like the smallness of a print, or like the smallness of like a knob.
Right. Yeah, I think that when I photograph, I do like to photograph like at home and everything. And sometimes I feel like the things that I create are actually collages of home objects, things that we have at home. And sometimes they're invisible to us, but they're actually very representative of like who we are and the things that we gather and what these items say about us. And, even like the plastic bag and being this like invisible thing in our life that we use every day, and then trying to create this like story and landscape from it as well. Mm-hmm. It kind of is like this hidden world that we don't see.
In these recent COVID times, have you been printmaking with things from home?
Not really, just more like more of archiving my objects and like taking photographs of them. And I just actually started back at work recently, so I do hope to start printing soon.
Oh, I see. Nice. We have some affirmation from the chat as well, so noting the organic, natural elements. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, what's next for you? Where do you see your work going?
I definitely do want to expand a little bit into more three-dimensional work. I think that as a printmaker and photographer, like I love these mediums, but they definitely do bring me I stay into a two-dimensional world. And I do think that my latest pieces are trying to like become a little bit more three-dimensional. So I definitely want to branch out a little bit more and just keep exploring. I just moved to the Bronx, so I'm also just exploring the art community here and I still want to maintain my Queens connections as well.
Yeah, a whole new world that opens.
Definitely.
All right, Nancy, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Naomi.
All right, last but certainly not least, we have Marie Saint-Cyr. Marie migrated to the United States from Haiti at the age of 8 and is currently based in Wyandanch, New York. Apologies, I don't know how to pronounce that. Working as a visual artist, educator, and arts administrator. Marie received a BFA in Fine Arts and a minor in Art History from the Fashion Institute of Technology. And since 2018, she's been running her own project management company, Saint-Cyr Art Studio. Marie, hello.
Hey, Naomi.
All right. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And thank you for J-Cal and Naomi and Heng-Gil for putting this together. So once again, my name is Marie Saint-Cyr, and I'll be kind of talking about 2 of my pieces that are in the show. And I decided to talk about these 2 pieces because I feel like they really visualize and communicate what I do within my art. So the paintings, I work mostly in oil paint, and I would say that I am an abstract expressionist. So this is one of the first piece I'll be starting with. It's called Step Into Reality. It was part of a series called Step In, Step Out that I did back in 2019. And so I work a bit of an interesting way. I start out by making a collage on Photoshop. And that is what I do is I find different photos of the Caribbean. It can be any place in the Caribbean, really. Different pictures that has beautiful pastel colors, bright colors. And then I'll go on Photoshop and I'll rearrange all the pictures and create this new space. But I will also leave white space within the collage. So if you look at my painting, you'll see that there are some things that are recognizable, but there's also a lot of these mark makings that maybe might not make sense. So what I try to do with my work is to kind of like experiment with 2D and 3D shapes and kind of see how they can, when I juxtapose them together, see how they will visually affect the eyes. I think a lot, and I remember growing up, I would always think about, how we can only experience reality through our 5 senses and how we're limited by that. So through my paintings, I kind of try to imagine, what if reality is this way? What if this is true reality, but we just experience space in a different way? I also really, as mentioned, I am from Haiti. And I try to really kind of like highlight the beautiful parts of the Caribbean and Haiti specifically within my work. Abstractly, I do that a lot through the use of the colors. The bright colors usually symbolize the strength and the vibrancy of the Caribbean people. A lot of the objects and spaces, they are from the Caribbean, and me putting the collage and photo together, that's just like me thinking, how can I like visually make this be like aesthetically pleasing? Because if you look at it, it is a bit chaotic sometimes, but it also has some kind of gracefulness to it. It also makes you think about how, in life, we all go through a lot, but we have to find some way to bring like beauty or find the beauty within all the chaos that we might be experiencing. So this is one of my favorite pieces, Step Into Reality. There's not like really one interpretation of it. It's kind of just giving you a feeling like you're stepped outside, but you've also stepped inside simultaneously. Just playing around with different things. And it's one of those paintings that the more you look at it, you'll kind of start to see different things in it. And based on your experience, emotions, growing up life experiences, your mind will see like people or different things within the painting, which is always fun. You can go to the next piece. The next piece I'll be talking about is called Jump In. And this is one of my other favorite pieces. And it was also part of the same series, Step In, Step Out, kind of trying to do the same thing where it makes you feel like you've stepped inside, but you've also stepped outside simultaneously. And this piece was actually, it was at the Haitian Embassy for 6 months, part of a exhibit, which I was really proud of it, that it was able to be accepted for it. And as you can see in this piece, the colors are a lot more bright compared to the other one. I would say that I'm a very bright and joyful person, and I'm attracted to bright and colorful colors. So I think I use that a lot. So that way when viewers look at it, it kind of just like makes you want to smile, or bring a little bit of joy by looking at it. And also a lot of the spaces where you see there's like these random mark makings or abstract shapes, that is created by kind of like, so I work in where I will work, I say like consciously, you know, where I'm working and I'm really focusing and paying attention to what I'm doing. And then after that, I will kind of like listen to music, and I'll allow my emotions, my thoughts, if I'm having some kind of dilemma at work or something, like things that will be going through my mind, I will allow that to affect what marks I make, what colors I choose, and then I would kind of like go back and see what I made when I wasn't really thinking about it, fix it up a bit, and then go back again. So it's like a back and forth between like automatic painting, which is when you're not really thinking about it, where you kind of try to allow subconsciously like things that you might be feeling or thinking to kind of like go to the painting. So sometimes I say that like the painting, it's really for the viewer, and then the process is for me. I enjoy the process more than the product, like the finished piece. So in a way, painting, it's a way for me to, you know, figure out issues. If I'm going through something, to try to work it out through the painting. So the colors will change based on my life experiences. Sometimes a series might be very bright, another time might be dark. So it's kind of is like, you know, a bit of like my life journey and stuff. Oh, and also thank you to Dario. I am one of the artists that's doing the residency in Governor's Island. And right now my work is slightly moving somewhere. It's still the same thing, but the colors are slightly changing to much more pastel and less bright. And I think that's just as I grow with age. Maybe my eyes are more attracted to a more calmer colors than ones that are really bright. I think that's enough right now. And if anyone has any questions or comments, we can definitely chat about that.
Awesome. Thank you, Marie. I'll start us off with a question. So for these two pieces, are they different angles of the same location, or have you're shaking your head up? So they're all different.
Well, they share some similarities, because what I do is when I'm gonna work on a new series, I'll take the time to just find a lot of different images, put them all in a folder, and then all of those images I'll reuse them to make different collages. So sometimes in a series you might see a same image that keeps popping up throughout the same paintings, but that's because I'm collaging and taking from this photo, putting into that. But no, they're not of the same space, but they have some similarities, because when I work, I like to work with like 5 paintings at once, like surrounding me. So I'll move from this one to that one. So a lot of times the colors will be, and one will look like the same in the other one. So they tend to influence each other as I'm working on them.
Mm-hmm. They are part of the same series, right?
Yes, they are. Mm-hmm.
All right, we have a question from Amanda. I like how the sturdiness of the architecture intersects with the nature and abstraction. Is the architecture that is represented in the work also from or inspired by Haiti?
Some of the architectures are definitely. I feel like if you have visited the island before, you'll be able to recognize them. Like the traditional architectures, once you see them, you know what they are. But if you haven't been there, it's not something that you might recognize. But some of them are traditional Haitian architecture, and others are just from other islands within the Caribbean that I've kind of mashed up together. So I kind of try to add those as little clues, so that way if you see it. But a lot of times I've had people who, you know, who are Haitians or they've been to Haiti, they'll see it and it'll be like, oh, it brings back this memory of this great thing and this and that. And it's always nice to hear, you know, their interpretation and seeing how I know how the process of making the artwork was for me, and now seeing how it's affecting them. It's always like a cool thing to see.
Yeah. Is there any aspect of Haiti that you're thinking about or that you want? Well, I guess for you personally, maybe, since you said, you like that it's open for interpretation, but yeah, for you, what about Haiti were you thinking about?
I mostly think about the architecture. I don't know why I think about the architecture so much. I think it might have to be because since I work abstractly, having the architecture being so geometric and very sturdy, it kind of helps to anchor my paintings together and to balance all of the other chaos. But I personally really enjoy the pastel and the traditional architecture of the island. And I haven't been there in almost 12 years. I have a flight to go there in December, but I don't know if it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like a way of me thinking back to my childhood, growing up there for 8 years, and all of these memories that I have, like playing hopscotch under the moon, where the moon was the only light that you had. All these other things, I try to sometimes think about them and add them into the painting. So it is a way of self-reflecting personally for me. But then for the viewer, it's kind of like just really mostly the images. Maybe that'll help them reflect on something else. So that's why I keep it open to interpretation, because the process is for me, and then the final piece is for you to interpret however you wish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like for you, it's like there's the structure of the architecture, but there's also like whatever's just happening in your
it's like
both the foreground and background. Yeah.
Exactly.
Did I get it? Yeah. Yeah. So I think at this point we can invite everyone back onto the screen, and those of you viewing, if you have any questions that you wanted to ask of the previous artist or Marie, you can ask them now, or we can also take these few minutes for us here on the screen to ask each other questions. So yeah, let's start.
I had a question for Marie. I really love the brightness of your paintings, and I was curious if you have paintings where you integrate people and spaces, and if it's intentional that you exclude the human body from the final product.
Yeah, that's actually interesting, because I intentionally would not paint people, because I felt like once I added a person in there, it would automatically create that there's a specific narrative that the piece has to be about. But last year, I actually did this mural where it was people in abstract space. And then I did one again 2 months ago, and I really enjoyed it. So moving forward, I'm planning to add people within my public art projects. And then I'm also planning to start a new series where it's people and abstract art, but it's going to be photos that we're taking of me back in Haiti when I was like 6, 7 or so. And I'll be photoshopping the photo of me and putting myself within these abstract space. So that's going to be interesting, because it'll be the first time really painting someone within my abstract spaces, but I think it's also very personal because it is me within all of them. So I'm excited to see how that turns out, and also to see how people interpret the work now that there's a person within the piece.
My question was also for you, but you kind of already answered it already. I know you mentioned that your work was already presented in the embassy, but I wanted to know if you had an opportunity to make a mural, because I feel like this blown up, it would shock passerbys.
Yeah.
you already answered my question. So hopefully more are on the horizon.
Thank you.
In New York City, Haiti, and everywhere else around the country.
Agreed. Thank you.
I actually had another question for Marie as well. What percentage, say, I know your paintings must take a lot of time. There's so much detail in them. And I know it must also take a lot of time for you to be able to like Photoshop all the images you want to collage to then paint. Like, what percentage of the time does it take to do all that pre-work before you get to the painting?
It really depends, because sometimes I might get like really into like, you know, the like I can focus and I might get all the Photoshop done in like a day or two. Other times I'm not able to really focus on, like, I don't feel that inspiration, where it might take months to get them all done. I think I did the 2019 Step In, Step Out series. I finished that. I started in January and I finished it in March. And that was about 7 pieces that I did, but I was like really focused on it. And the other thing with me is, since I have, you know, I work full time and I do all these other things, I go through these certain months where I can't focus on painting. It's not that I don't want to paint. It's just my mind can only focus on more admin things and all those stuff. And then I'll have other months where it's just like, I need to paint, like I'm itching to paint. I have to paint, kind of a thing. And I just have to like learn to live with it, where I even maybe I'm like, I should be painting right now. But I have to accept that, you know, don't force it so much, because I understand my mind. Sometimes it's better to focus on other things. And then like right now, I feel like it's starting to pick up the need, and that I'm able to focus to paint. So that's why I'm hoping to start the new series this fall and hopefully finish by January.
I wanted to loop back to a question that Haeyun J. Lee asked for Monnero. So she writes, I like how you bring people in by using your work. There you go. However, how do you manage personal space versus public space? So I guess you could interpret that in a couple of ways, but go ahead.
Well, season definitely plays into it because this originally was going to be a plan for the summer. So I mentioned like my 25th birthday was a major component of the creation of this. My birthday's in January. However, the start of the project was going to be happening around the summertime because more free time, people are in the parks. And I feel like the parks are like a great environment for this, because this is where I'm usually seeing this happen. However, instead of on a custom domino board, it's usually on cardboard paper, paper and things of that nature. However, in the wintertime or when other weather is affecting us, indoor spaces, even at salons and barbershops, could be environments that I could have conversations. That was actually where I had the conversation with the Dominican mother. It was in a Dominican beauty salon. And all her friends, as well as other patrons of the salon, wanted to participate.
Nice. Do you think people like that public aspect, or, you know, talk about certain things more so in public than in private, or the other way around?
I think it depends, because sometimes it depends on the topic. It depends on what they plan on sharing. People sometimes don't always have a listening ear, and there's things people want to get off their chest. Sometimes in the midst of gameplay might be the best environment for it, because some things you don't really want to share just in a conversation with someone eye to eye. But in the midst of gameplay, where it kind of breaks down barriers, makes it a fun environment, especially when I'm talking juice, and food is involved.
All right, anyone else have any burning questions?
Just comment, once I saw your work, and after that, I'm seeing a lot of domino players in the park and on the streets. They must have been there before, but then, I just passed by without realizing that they are playing dominoes. But then now I often see, people playing dominoes on the street at the corner, in the park. And then there are a lot of people, like it's not only 2 people game. There are like, I've seen like 5 people playing together. Is that possible?
I mean, sometimes people play with teams.
Oh,
That could be a
that's
thing. I don't know about 5. There are some dominoes I'm not really familiar with that have like 9 dots on the board. I'm not really familiar with that. The one I usually play with goes up to 6, and it's up to 4 people.
Mhm.
It's usually every man for themselves. However, you can play with teammates. And it's interesting that you're starting to see them all over New York City when you're passing by. Have you ever stopped by and kind of listen in on the conversation that they're having? Because it's not just competition and competitive spirit, but they're talking about real life issues, politics, and everything else that we deal with as humans in this land.
Yeah, I stopped by and I looking at them, and then everyone looks at me. They stop playing.
So next time I challenge you to don't just stop by to listen in, but stop by to learn. I want you to learn how to play.
Yeah.
Gotta play the game, Heng.
Next step.
And Hang Guy is actually the one who suggested that I kind of turn it into like an interactive piece in the gallery where you let onlookers kind of interact and kind of share their story.
Yeah.
I wonder if I can play socially distanced.
Yeah.
Oh, I hear too many people at once.
Good.
What was that?
It would have been nicer, and then at some point, we should realize that. Yeah.
Maybe
I had a
like
question about
socially
Mario.
distanced.
Oh yeah, socially distanced down.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the table's 6 feet, but it's about 4 or 3. So I had a question for Dario. I know you said you usually not attached to your pieces, but I know there has to be a case for one or one particular item that you constantly reuse in multiple pieces.
That's a really good question. So some friends call me a hoarder because I do hold on to a lot of objects because I use them for pieces as well. So my objects become interchangeable with some of my pieces. One object that I use over and over again is this hourglass that I bought from Target that I think is really just fits so much of my work in so many ways. So if I had to choose an object, I would say that one, which is generally like my old paintings, my old pieces, or the objects that I just generally use for my artwork. I tend to hold on to. So I guess I do have a sentimental value for them, and I guess that's why I hold on to them, but I think it's also because I know that I could reuse them for future art. So it's almost more like having supplies stowed away that I could always just save for a rainy day.
You said the one with the stuffed sock was your favorite, though, right?
It's one of my favorites.
Is there a reason why?
Because there's a lightness to it. It just makes me happy. It's so tall. There's actually essential oil in the little glass jar that's on the little shelf installed in the wall there, of lavender. It's actually in some ways an ode to a good friend of mine who I, see as being a free spirit. Shout out to Lindsay. I don't know if she's listening, but anyway, in a lot of ways, I just love the exuberance of it. At least that's the way that I interpret it. Others may see it differently, and that's totally fine. But yeah, it makes me happy.
Awesome.
I also had a question for Angela. We hear a lot of talks about incorporating culture with the cookout theme, Caribbean vibes. Have you ever incorporated Ecuador into some of your projects? Because that's a country I've been to. I studied abroad, Spanish 101 over there, and it was a great experience. So I'm hoping to hear from you about things that kind of take me back, just like the experience of some of Marie's people that experience her art. Because I missed that experience.
Yeah. I feel like I get asked that question a lot, but I haven't find a way to integrate images of my country into my work. I feel like how my country is representing in my work is by how I was raised by my family and how I experienced growing up in a very modest home. And also just in I think it's just reflected in my process by the fact that I'm able to recycle these materials and transform them into something that that can have a new life. I mean, I do hope in the future to be able to maybe use some of the pattern, but I think another reason why I don't do that is because I like to create work that is independent of any of my cultural identities, but instead is more of a true reflection of myself. And so I don't know. I feel like maybe eventually in the future, once I find the right way to integrate it in a way that feels real to me and myself, I will. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Right, got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really love when you digitized all your objects into these like Illustrator looking files. And then like you were able to like expand your collages, and you really do see the shift in your work when you go from that big step.
Yeah, I think once you go digital, is almost like limitations don't really exist anymore, because in Photoshop especially, you can transform and you can duplicate and you can reduce and do a variety of things that you wouldn't actually be able to do with the actual physical form. So I'm glad that I got to that point, and it seems like a very obvious choice, but it actually took me 3 paintings before I realized that I was allowed to do that. And so, yeah, I'm very glad that I went that route. Especially now I'm able to like, I mean, this is something that I think about like the longevity of the images that I have and to be able to preserve them, and especially in images and shapes that I like a lot. I think having them in the digital form really secures that. Like maybe Angela 80 years down the road will still be making and using these things, and having them in a digital form makes that maybe possible. So yeah.
Well, also it can live on even if you paint over it, right?
Yeah. And I think I like also eventually maybe the shareability of them. Like what can someone make with them if they wanted to? Like what will they mean to them? What can they create with them? That's also something interesting. Yeah.
Well, I think if there aren't any more questions and no other questions from the audience, perhaps it's interesting to add. I'm trying to think of like a good lightning round question, but that's really hard. Maybe one, since this is you know, a professional development program for all of you guys, one word to describe how you're looking towards the future with your artwork. Too abstract.
I mean, at least probably the most important thing for me in this program is really having to meet all of you artists. I think I mentioned this before, but you know, graduating after graduation, at least for me, it has been really difficult to keep artist type connections and friends, and to be able to meet all of you and all, you know, especially the fact that you're local, that you're all some form of like immigrant or immigrant heritage or background. It was just like an immediate connection. And then, yeah, just learning from all of you and seeing your work and seeing how in some way we're all working the same way, but yet creating completely different work. So.
Right. I was definitely getting a lot of like hearing Dario and Angela speak, and Marie and Monnero also talking about like objects and like finding ways, and like I feel like a hoarder all the time, and like the only way I can excuse myself is by adding it to my art. And then all of a sudden when it's in my art, I'm like, this has meaning. And I definitely see that in all of you, and it's I don't feel alone in that.
It's definitely amazing the parallels in some of our work, some of our processes as well. I definitely think that those existed before we met, but we've been able to have such great conversations as a community on art in many different ways. We're interdisciplinary artists, some of us. We also work in different media. So it's been a very enriching experience. And yeah, I mean, I second what Nancy and Angela say. I mean, also my being a first generation Grenadian American here from my mom's side, I definitely in some ways connect with you on those levels as well, but have also been enriched by your experiences and where your families come from as well.
Thank you.
I'll go. And I think to answer your question, I think the word for me is confident when it comes to my art practice. I think this year I focused a lot on my business and my day job, which is good. And the next year I want to flip it around and focus more on the art practice. So, and I think I just have to learn how to keep doing that and rotate them, where one year it's this and that, and then the next year it's this and that, to try to balance them out. But I also got to meet some of the other fellows outside of the, like when we would meet, which was really nice. I remember I got to meet up with Angela and to see her cat and everything and to chat. And I've gotten to chat with Dario outside at the residency and just talk about, you know, life, art, day jobs, and stuff like that. But I do definitely, I think Pete had said, you think we might collaborate, but I do feel like we will definitely collaborate in the future. When opportunities come up, we'll think of each other, kind of a thing. And I'm definitely always open for collaboration and to help out in any way I can. And this has been a really great experience, definitely. And it's just like, you know, a stepping stone. You do this and then you just keep doing and doing better things. And then if you see an opportunity that might not be for you, but it might be better for someone else, we can send it to each other and do that.
And that's kind of like a perfect segue to what I was going to say. My word would be growth. And having the opportunity to be a part of this community, mind you, which is the biggest word on my board.
I think
it was just
no, go ahead.
Oh, it was just an opportunity to grow together based on like the panelists that came in to speak to us. We got an opportunity to learn from them. We got an opportunity to learn from each other. And we got an opportunity to learn from this year. This year has been difficult, challenging for all of us. I'm sure outside of art, you guys had other things you guys had to face. But next year, we're going to grow from it. Everything we have experienced this year is going to challenge us to do better next year.
And I was just going to say, I don't think I answered Naomi's question, but the word I would choose is proud, because I definitely like having this experience of being in a group show with all of you is like something that even if a pandemic wasn't happening, I would be excited and proud of.
I don't think I answered the question either. My word would be, I've got to think of a word that none of you use. It would be equipped. I think this residency has equipped me with a lot of knowledge of the business, some of which I didn't learn in my MFA program. I learned a lot from there, but I think this was a great opportunity for me to develop more professional development as an artist and as an art facilitator for my nonprofit. So just in general, I feel like this has provided a lot of opportunity and wisdom that I could then use moving forward. And also just the pandemic, you know, just the way that worked out. You know, we've had to navigate still having these meetings, having our, you know, virtual artist talk series. I mean, you guys have really spearheaded that and done a great job, Heng and Naomi. So thank you so much for that. And, you know, I think after this year, like, we're just more equipped for anything that we want to do art-wise, like, you know, next year. If the pandemic continues, we'll be ready for it.
Yes, just to add, I definitely agree with Dario when it comes to feeling equipped. I think there was this opportunity that I had applied for, and at first I wasn't going to apply because they had to do a lot with business. But I was looking through my resume and I knew that I had the JCal program on it and everything. and some other things. And it kind of just gave me an extra boost of confidence that it might like just put me ahead of some others, and I'm able to like get it. And I did get accepted into it. And it's interesting because it's like learning learning how to work with the government and to receive contracts from the government as an artist, which I feel like is very different from what schools might make you think of, like, you know, work as an artist working with the government and getting contracts. So I'm definitely planning to, let me lock my door, my sister's about to come in. I'm definitely planning to, what I'm learning, you know, how artists can work with the government, to definitely pass on that information to you guys and other artists, because we definitely have to be entrepreneurial these days and find different ways to, because a lot of us do different things, so we got to find ways to make it all work somehow.
I'm not sure if I'm correct or not, but that sounds like more murals coming soon.
No, definitely. I got one with the NYC Dot, which was that was my goal for this year, was to get a New York City public art project. It was supposed to be in October, but they said in next year, which is fine with me. So that's exciting. And it's like, now I'm feeling a bit more confident to apply for bigger, larger projects, kind of. It's still scary every time, but yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, take this experience and let it feed the next, for sure. So thank you, everybody. I'll pass the microphone briefly to Heng-Gil for any concluding thoughts.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you very much for all artists for sharing your work. And then I think, you know, you guys at the end, you know, you guys gave me another job with the collaboration. I feel like, you know, I have to do something on that. And thank you very much for thank you very much, you know, all audiences, you know, who are watching this YouTube. Thank you for watching and being with us for like 2 hours. And, you know, I would like to thank to Jerome Foundation and then the Department of Cultural Affairs of New York City. Without their help and support, you know, we couldn't run this program. And Naomi, you have something to share with the audience about the programs and the upcoming events. So why don't you go ahead and do that?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone that the exhibition is viewable online as well for those of you who may not be able to travel out to Jamaica, but also we have special gallery hours where some of the artists will be present in the gallery for you to meet and talk with. And so that is this Saturday, where Angela will be there, and then that's the 10th, and then October 17th, Megan will be there. And you can sign up on our website as well, just to help everyone space out their visit. And I think that's it. Yeah. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. And, you know, if it's okay for me to remind everyone, go register to vote, take the census, watch the debate tonight, and hope to see you in the gallery at some point. If you're not available on Saturdays, and that's 12 to 5, you can also email me at nkuo@jcal.org to schedule a visit during the week as well. So yeah, we'd really love to just share all these awesome works with you guys. And with that, concludes tonight's event. Thank you so much, and hope everyone just is well and take care, and best of luck for the rest of 2020. All right, thank you.